everyone, and welcome to Backseat Sports. I'm Josh, and that is Caleb. And welcome in, everybody, because today's going to be a wild one. I mean, this is some pretty crazy timing, because this was the video that we had literally had planned for this week for a while now. And it ended up being pretty timely to really talk about Scott Frost and the expectations for the season, coming off of the news coming out today, or yes, yesterday, about the potential investigation from the NCAA on Nebraska. So it's going to be a pretty interesting video going through all of that, and then the potential for Scott Frost and the hot seat, question mark, going into the season. We have lots to talk about today for sure. Caleb, how you doing?
Man, I'm confused. Checked ESPN the lunch break and was like, what on earth?
Nebraska in the headlines, you know?
Yeah, we're the top of the news on ESPN, and for a violation from the NCAA, I mean, crazy. Well, press conference to watch. Twitter was blowing up as always. It was a weird start to the day, that's for sure.
It was, man. It was. There's a lot to kind of go through here for all of you guys out there, if you guys are just hopping into the video. But basically, straightforward is that it came out today that Nebraska is getting investigated by the NCAA regarding apparently two separate things. So one involving the use of a specialist or an analyst, a special teams analyst, which was Jonathan Rutledge, who was hired last year as a special teams analyst for the Huskers. And he ended up getting released from the team on January 14th. But basically, the whole idea is that what Nebraska is getting investigated for is the analyst interacting with the players, where you can only have 10 official assistants who are able to interact with the players. And that apparently Rutledge was having too much interaction with the players, and that violated the NCAA rules for the use of the analysts. And then also with team workouts and getting investigated for potentially having workouts off-site where coaches were visiting the players while working out off-site, which would also be against violation. So these are kind of the two big things. And there was also something regarding not investigation, but also news with Frost potentially with the Oklahoma game as well. So a lot of news about Frost this week coming out, which is a pretty big surprise, like T-minus almost a week or 10 days before the freaking kickoff to the season, which is crazy. So what are your initial thoughts on it?
Yeah, and then the other thing too is there was team workouts off-site. That was also, that was part of it.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. I mean, now, I thought John Rutledge was just fired for, just not being very good at special teams last season.
May still be the case, because we were not good at special teams last season.
But the fact that maybe we were, we're getting investigated.
There could be more to the story,
that he was probably cheating or talking to players. Essentially, they said there's video evidence proving that. So,
that's what's weird too.
That's what's interesting in the investigation. Is Nebraska getting ahead of this by saying it? Did we report it? I guess those are kind of like my biggest questions.
And then what would the potential fallout be if we were guilty of these things,
It sounds pretty clear that we did do it, I guess, from the video evidence and Scott Frost. I mean, getting a lawyer is not,
the articles were pretty
damning
factual, they were saying this happened, so it was a little bit surprising in that regard. Basically, it seemed like those were kind of the details that the most important details overall, with the use of the analysts and the off-site workouts especially during COVID, where things supposedly were taking, teams were taking it fairly seriously. It's hard to exactly say, because we were looking into cases about how this could play out and what that could look like, and there have been some decent comparisons over the last decade or so when it comes to this similar stuff. I mean, how do you feel about the comparisons there, Caleb?
Yeah, that was a really interesting thing. I mean, our first questions are, how bad is this? With Twitter, on Twitter, some people are like, oh, this is not a big deal whatsoever. Everybody's doing it. Or, the sky's falling. There really wasn't any in between.
Yeah, it's really polar opposites. It's either worst case scenario or it's no big deal at all.
And I think we both kind of fall somewhere on the in-between on that.
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously this is a deal, especially if we do, if they do find us guilty of this. And Josh and I were digging up some case studies. One was UTEP in 2018, 2019 kind of had a really similar situation kind of happen to this.
Yeah, but with their combined programs.
Yeah, it was with two different programs, which you're right. They had a football and the softball. Fun enough, the softball coach ended up getting fired, and she was from Nebraska. Tobin Echohawk, shout out our third baseman in the 90s.
There you go.
A very good player there. She got fired because she had extra practice time. She added extra practice times.
There was off-site workouts as well with that too for UTEP. And then the football team had the assistant situation. So they had a quality control specialist who was getting involved with the team and the players, even though they already had the maximum number of coaches allowed to interact with players. So those two combined create a pretty similar situation. It seems like what we're going through with Nebraska, which is why the potential punishments get kind of interesting. So like, what did you find there?
So yeah, the softball team had 2 less hours a week for the whole year. So instead of 20 hours of practice a week, they only got 18 as a team, which that adds up a lot over the course of a year. That's 1 less workout, 1 less walkthrough, whatever you want to say those 2 hours are. And then for the football team, they had 1 less countable coach.
And then as well, the Echohawk had a suspension, a 1 year or a 15% suspension from the season. So basically, I mean, in football terms, that'd be like 1.5, 2 games, basically, if that was to be the case. So there are some potential worlds where that could be a suspension in the causes for Frost, if he's like proven to have like directed it or had more involvement with it, which is may not be the case. That's still to be decided, I guess.
But it looks like the whole program is going to get punished, even if, it was one coach or anything like that.
Yeah, the program would still have some sort of punishment.
Yeah.
And then the other case, which was at least somewhat similar that we could find, was the Rich Rodriguez Michigan case in 2010, where basically there was a situation where they were having way more practice than the allotted amount of time. And it was stated that Michigan forgot to track the amount of time that they were practicing, or they weren't able to track, or they didn't track for whatever reason. And basically they practiced and had workouts way more than the allotted time allowed. And overall they had like a 3-year probation of having less workouts for a total of 3 years after that. So basically added up to around somewhere 195 hours over the span of 3 years that they had to limit their practice. So that's pretty significant as well. Yeah. So we'll see what ends up happening with Nebraska. It could be up, it seems like some sort of limit on practices seems fairly likely, but then it comes down to whether or not there'll be more punishment.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing too is Michigan self-reported, and so did UTEP. And it didn't say that we self-reported in the press conference. It said we got an investigation. Well, it said we were complying. It doesn't.
There were some other
didn't
articles
say that we were self-reported. Although some people said we did. It's still up in the air though. So whether that's just because they can't report. Hopefully we did self-report, because I think we'd probably get less of a punishment, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean,
I would guess.
I feel like the logic would be there for less of a punishment if that was the case.
I think one of the arguments too that I saw online that I kind of wanted to address is, everybody did this during COVID.
So what's the big deal?
So what's the big deal? Well, the problem is, if everybody is doing it, then were we really the dumb ones out of the whole country to get caught? Or was it the case of everybody really wasn't doing it, and we actually did get punished for it because we did do it.
Yeah.
So I think it's either one of those to me. If everybody was really doing it, then why out of all 130 football programs were we the only one to get caught? It's not because I don't think people have a vendetta out for us. I think it's because we were probably dumb, or the fact is that not everybody was doing it.
Or else everyone's doing it. We self-reported, and we're just the most honest, truthful folk out there.
But
now we're talking.
But also, it's a
the
it's a year
analyst
later.
thing does seem more dumb. That kind of feels dumb.
I feel that's also less of a punishment though too. So the practice thing is way worse than the analyst thing. The analyst, the one gets fired.
Yes, that's also true. There would be some sort of smaller team punishment generally.
Yeah,
and especially with the situation for Nebraska, where it seemed like Rutledge was only having small conversation. It wasn't consistent. It was more here and there.
Yeah, the UTEP Tobin Echohawk one was a lot worse, where it was consistently, and that was throughout a whole year too.
Yeah, almost 2. Yeah. So
I
would imagine we're maybe, and then and that was the same thing with Michigan, was that there was it was a lot of extra practice. So I don't think we're on those levels.
I guess we don't know though, because I don't remember the COVID restriction thing or how long we did.
Well, that's true. The COVID restriction aspects could be more strict because
we broke the rule, because we broke the rule during like a pandemic type thing.
Endangered the players.
Yeah, exactly.
That could be like
I could see Kevin Warren getting kind of mad and punishing us ourselves too.
Right. But that's the thing, is with us kind of fighting back on the whole football thing, then suddenly you're like, okay, here comes the NCAA.
And they were breaking the, and we knew
Kevin
you were breaking
Warren,
the rules.
yeah. So that's where I get a little nervous with that, would be those types of situations. That would be where I get a little bit worried about the potential violations, moving forward as well. So I guess we'll have to see with that. Our big conversation we wanted to have overall, and we'll definitely talk more about these things during this conversation, would be about Frost and the actual hot seat aspects of his current situation, where a lot of different media has had Frost on the quote unquote hot seat list. Whether or not Nebraska fans think that that's the case or not, there is a public perception that Frost might be on some sort of hot seat, or at least it's getting warm. And so we wanted to debate what that would look like with this season. Obviously, he's coaching us this year. So the debate would be, is he a lock to coach next year? Is there a situation where he doesn't? Is if we go 3 or 4 or 5 wins, if we don't have another bowl game, is there a world where he actually does get fired? Or what does it take to lock him in for another few years this season? And that's kind of the debate. So off the rip here, Caleb, where are you at with the kind of situation? Where's your hot scale, your spicy warm scale for Frost? And what does that look like for Nebraska football this season heading into next?
He controls his own destiny, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, if he has a good season this year, even with the stuff that happened, while not good and definitely not helpful, I think he's fine. But then it starts to get more spicy, the less well he does this season.
Definitely.
Having that stuff happen, because then here comes the thing is, we had Scott Frost on a big extension, so that was one big reason we'd probably keep him. But now he gets in a lot of trouble. We get less practice time. Say we do get limited 2 hours a week, week for the next year, which would really stink. And he does get in trouble for that stuff. And he has a bad season. Now we have some cause to fire him, where maybe we reduce how much we'd have to pay him out, or maybe not have to pay him out whatsoever.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that plays a big factor.
Yeah, man. But then there's the other aspect. There's a lot of factors here that you have to consider.
There's a ton.
Would you really fire Frost? Let's say he just does horrible, but would you really fire Frost in a world? And it especially if we got probations now, what coach wants to come to Nebraska when we fired 3 straight coaches and we're now on probation and all of these things? That seems like a pretty horrible job to take. And then at that point, it almost feels like you're almost
Urban Meyer
have
did
to
it.
keep Frost around.
Urban Meyer did
but
it.
Ohio State's a little bit different situation where they were, they're winning, there's a little bit different situation. I don't know. Those things, there's a lot of variables. And that's what gets a little bit worrisome for the future of the program either way. So as for Frost specifically, what line do you think Husker fans and the program as a whole would be where's the this is worthy of firing line versus where's the it's very up? Where's the gray line for you? Where does it end? Where does it stop? 2 wins, 3 wins?
I think it's higher than that, honestly.
Really?
I think it's higher than that.
4?
Yeah, I think if he won 4, I think it's definitely we've seen this tape already type deal.
Yeah.
I think 5's really interesting. 5 is a super interesting number where I could see it either way.
People will definitely be pissed if we win 5.
But here's the thing, if we only win 5 games, you have a 4th-year starting quarterback. And obviously, this is so many ifs at this point. Guys, we can have a great season. I'm not saying it's going to be bad.
To be fair, our predictions, I had us winning 7.
I have us winning.
No, spoiler alert. If you want to go watch our predictions video, definitely go watch our predictions video.
100%.
And we're going to be having a Big Ten West video coming out in the next, before our game at least. And then we'll have the Illinois prediction video as well. So there's a lot of videos coming down the pipe here. But yeah, so, I had us at 7, Caleb had us at 5.
I think 5's more interesting because I thought people would be upset at 5, but I didn't think he'd get fired. Now I'm more concerned if we do get punished.
Right, with more of the hot water now.
Yeah, and just, yeah.
Right, looking at our schedule, we have a handful of wins. Obviously, Fordham's a gimme. So then you're looking at, Purdue's going to have a tough year. Illinois is on a new head coach. You're you've got Michigan State on a second-year head coach. Minnesota is an interesting one. Northwestern's interesting. So, and then you have Buffalo as well. So, I mean, you're a Nebraska program. You should be beating Fordham. You should be beating Buffalo, even though Buffalo is scary. I mean, we talked about how scary Buffalo is. And so suddenly you're looking at like, all right, I mean, if all things go horribly, if everything goes horrible, 2 wins isn't like I could at least see it being possible, which would be
that would be horrifying.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It'd be like absolute worst case scenario, everything going wrong. But
that's
like
Armageddon happens.
Possible. I also think 9 wins is possible. Like that would be like 2-9 is Nebraska's in a weird year here, where like 2-9 everything's possible in between.
Like this definitely doesn't help. And I think if you're a new AD and then you get hired and then you find out your coach is under investigation, like
I mean, yeah, that
doesn't make you happy.
No.
Like that doesn't help your seat whatsoever. So I don't think it's nothing. I think the Rutledge is more of nothing, but but extra practices is more something
during COVID and the workouts and whatnot.
That's how I'd separate it. I'd say, you had an analyst who talked to players when he shouldn't have. Yeah, that stinks. You get a minor punishment from the NCAA, but the practice thing is a way bigger thing, and we've seen bigger punishments doled out on multiple teams, and that's something that you're much more in control of than a head coach than one staff person doing the wrong thing. So I think that's what worries me is more than Rutledge. Like I thought 5-7 he'd probably squeak through, but now I'm unsure with that happening. But again, that's all hearsay. That's just my personal opinion.
You also have to have a coach in mind to replace him if you're going to fire him, and that would be, I mean, generally at least that would be the idea. It was like if you're going to fire someone like that and pay him a lot of money, you better have a guy that you really like in the wings that is potentially going to be there. And if we don't, then like that gets pretty questionable about would you actually fire him? So, I mean, I don't know. When I look at the schedule, I don't think he gets fired after 5 wins. And then we'd still have Adrian Martinez for another year next year, which I mean, that's something else. And obviously, like we said, you're returning a starting quarterback. You're returning 9 of your 11 defensive starters. And then Will Honus, if he ends up playing at some point, could be 10. If he ends up playing at some point during the year, which seems unlikely. At least 9 of the 11 starters on defense. Like you should have, if a head coach is given that many returning players, you should have at least a pretty solid season. And yeah,
I think that's more likely that we have a solid season.
I agree.
Although again, like any outside noise is never great for a team.
No,
it's never good. Like this just isn't good. Like. It's definitely not nothing, especially like if we
10 days before a game,
10 days before your first game, now your head coach has to deal with getting a lawyer and figuring all this stuff out like
during the season.
And the NCAA has been poking their nose in Nebraska's whole operations for now who knows how long because of this investigation. Like that's just a lot of extra noise that a struggling football team does not need right now, especially on such a pivotal year. I think we can overcome it for sure. And again, I think Frost controls his own destiny. I think if a good year happens, I think people are really happy and comfortable. I just, but I also feel like, fan base is the same point, like, or not even the fan base. I feel like the people running the show would probably want results by year 4.
For sure. And I think that's pretty reasonable for the fan base and for people to have some sort of results by year 4 when you have your guy quarterback being there for all 4 years. And you're returning again, like I said, 9 of 11 starters on the defensive side.
Granted, if you don't like the quarterback, you had 3 other years to go recruit people.
Yeah, and develop those guys too.
And develop those guys.
For sure. So. I mean, let's go through the odds then. Would you say if he has 2 wins, it's 100% guarantee he's fired?
Yeah, I think it's the Mike Riley situation where like, you lose to like the Northern Illinois and everybody kind of knows it's over. Yeah.
Or Buffalo.
Yeah, I don't think Buffalo. Think Buffalo.
Well, Buffalo, I mean, besides that,
people would feel bad. I'd feel sad, but it feels likely.
No, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think from our perspective, it's very possible just because of how I think decent Buffalo could be this year.
Yeah, they have some draft picks,
Yeah, so, but I mean, obviously Fordham's that's impossible. It's like almost impossible to lose.
Yeah. If we had 2 wins, if we only beat Fordham and
then you pulled one out against Purdue, Michigan State, Buffalo, or Illinois.
Yeah, Minnesota, and that's it. Yeah, I feel like most everybody would be like, okay, he can't do it. I mean, I think that's pretty definitive.
With that many guys returning and that many super seniors.
Two would be a new low that we've seen. Like, it'd be like a new low. It'd be lower
so then at 3, what are the odds that he gets fired at 3 wins? Again, that's a Fordham win, and then either an Illinois, Buffalo, Purdue, Michigan State, Minnesota win.
I mean, again, I think it's 100 again because it's lower than Mike Riley. Like that'd be lowering the standards of like even Mike Riley. You know,
I wouldn't guarantee it at 3, but it would be pretty dang likely. It'd be like 90%. So like a near guarantee that he's fired at 3.
I'll give him a 1% chance to pull 99? that one out. 99.
Okay.
But there's no way. I'd probably.
Okay, so at 4, then I think 4 is really. I mean, 4 is. That's like depressing. That's like it feels like purgatory. Where it's like, I don't.
We've been here for so.
That's true. That's true.
We're
still in purgatory.
We've had one in the last 6 years. We've only had one like season over 500.
Yeah, so let's say 4 wins. That would be wins for me. Would be Fordham. I think Buffalo, and then Purdue, and then either Michigan State or Illinois. Would be the 4 wins there with losses to Oklahoma, Northwestern, Michigan, Minnesota, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. So. At 4, you're like, we are still not seeing progress. We've returned 9 seniors,
and we lost, and we still
lost to either Illinois or like a second-year head coach in Michigan State, or you got upset by Purdue.
We couldn't get over the hump of Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin,
Northwestern, who lost all their starters. So I mean, that would be pretty dang. I mean, again, 4 wins would be. So I can't emphasize how depressing 4 wins would be.
I don't think it'll happen. I don't think.
I mean, again,
there's no way.
Hesitantly semi-optimistic, I guess. So
we're hoping for the best, baby.
Like I have us at 7, so I'm still fairly optimistic. But if 4 happened, I would then be an 80% chance of firing. Where are you at?
I had the same number. I had the same number in my head, 80. I mean, I'll put it 85 to make it different.
I think there's a big jump from 4 to 5. Because
that's what I'm saying. I think that's the great area, and that's why I think this news makes it more likely than before.
Okay, interesting. So at 5 wins, then again, you're beating Illinois, Fordham, Buffalo, and then Michigan State and Purdue, and then losing to basically every other team.
Minnesota, Northwestern, Iowa, in the Wisconsin. West. Yeah.
And so, like again, the progress at 5 is still not there. That's just no progress. I mean, you can say, yay, we beat Illinois, which we lost to last year, but
we got don't sell that short. We got blown out to Illinois last year.
That's true.
They scored. They put up 42 on us,
but they still fired their coach. So it's like
Lovey.
Yeah, Lovey hit the sack, but I would say 5 would be 45% chance he gets fired. I would say it's actually unlikely he gets fired.
I'm gonna give it. I now think that if we do get in trouble, I'd say it's now. I would say that I was going to lean like a 50-50.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to give it 55. I'm going to say there's a 55.
Interesting.
It's more likely now.
Okay.
Because if we get busted, it's like, okay, we could probably get someone else that could do this. That'll probably follow the rules.
Am I crazy? Because I feel like a probation might almost guarantee Frost stays. Because, like I said, then who's gonna want to come to Nebraska to coach us? Who would? I just don't know who. Because if you fire the golden boy, if you fire the freaking prodigal son, and then the program's on probation.
See, that's Nebraska's fear. But I just think we just gotta keep.
Paying them $6 million and they'll show up.
You just keep reloading. We've paid more for head coaches than any other program in the last 10 years.
I mean, if we're paying $150 million for facilities, we can afford another coach, but.
Well, not even that. It's just it does suck. I mean, Nebraska's a tough place to play, but guess what? So are so many other places.
Right. I mean, Texas has been in the turmoil for the past 5 years too.
And Texas has recruiting easier than us.
Yeah, and they've gone through some golden boys too. So I mean, that's
the thing.
It's tough.
It sucks and it feels like the world's ending, but at the same time, life goes on. There's tons of good football coaches. We want it.
For sure.
We still want Gordon Frost.
So at 5, you'd say 55%. So then at 6 wins, does that jump significantly lower for you?
Yeah, I'd say.
I would say at 6, it's like 20%. It's pretty dang low.
Yeah, I was gonna say 30. So there's still room for it, but a lot less room.
Yeah, and then at 7, it's a lock that he stays. It's a lock.
I'll give it 90.
Okay.
I'll give it 90. I don't know, like
just because of you're just saying probation stuff still would be the 10%.
like not so much, more like 5%, but like maybe 5%. Like who knows? There's some guy that
Okay.
Trev likes or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor.
Open the doors. He is the one. He is a pretty juicy and interesting candidate. I mean, if he was to get fired by the Bengals, that would be interesting. But
he'd be tough. Like in this case, like he hasn't had much head coaching experience either. It's just the Bengals. But
yeah, I mean, I think an O coordinator spot at a big and the O coordinator for Nebraska would make a lot of sense for him. It's hard to say. Like
you could do even I don't know,
well, he could also be a mid-major head coach, like a Max type head coach for sure, and
or you could hopefully be a good OC at Nebraska,
or he could also go be an OC in the NFL potentially. So
exactly,
there's a lot of different. Anyway, we'll see. There's again the whole debate was if Frost was ever even to get fired, then who would be the coach? But that's probably a conversation for another time. We just wanted to go through the scenarios here and kind of almost set the table for the kind of season, the perspective, and the expectations. I think for Frost heading in, I don't think it's unreasonable. I think it's very reasonable to assume an expectation of 6 wins or more for Frost. As the baseline, that needs to be a thing this year. If you're returning that many guys, you're returning your guy, your starting quarterback. You have the nice transfers in Samari Torre and Omar Manning. You have the foundation. You're returning a lot of the O-line. Obviously, you lose Jaime, which hurts. You're bringing back a lot of those guys. You have, like you said, basically your whole defense coming back, all of your most talented players. I mean, you need to win 6 games. So,
I mean, it makes sense. I mean,
we'll see.
You go to the bowl game. I get it. Our schedule's hard, but and we got a tough draw, and we get a tough draw. But 6 wins. We're not asking him to beat Ohio State or Oklahoma. That's not the ask.
Right.
It's just 6 wins. And then you take away those 2, and that's still 10 other games you can find a way to win.
So I think that's fair overall. So that'll be interesting to see. I'll be interested to see what you guys' comments down below about your thoughts on the whole situation, your thoughts on the investigation and what that could look like for Nebraska and how that would affect the program moving forward. And then your personal expectations for Frost this season. Where do you set the bar for Frost this year, and what's your kind of minimum expectations and hopes for the team? And then where do you think this thing can go? Hopefully some optimism in the Husker fan base. I think there's still a lot of potential for
there's so many wins. There's so many wins on the board
potentially,
there.
But it comes down to executing and not choking these games away and turning the ball over, making those easy mistakes that we've been doing. So overall, we hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, drop a comment down below and let us know what you guys have to say. And then, of course, like the video, comment, subscribe, share the video if you guys really enjoyed it. But as always, guys, I'm Josh. That's Caleb. And, guys, this has been Backseat Sports, and we will see you next time. Go Big Red.
Big Red. Woo!